Step one, the initial contact. However they came to you or you came to them, the first conversation with an investor is critical because that is your chance to differentiate yourself from every other real estate agent they've ever spoken to. They've never met anybody who speaks ROI before in the housing market. So you have an opportunity to impress them, because if they start thinking in terms of ROI, and we're gonna get into what that means momentarily, but spitting that out as soon as you can so that they realize they're in the presence of somebody different. All right. What is ROI? ROI is yield plus HPA. Yield is the profit that an investor makes after collecting rent and paying expenses. All right. HPA is home price appreciation. The combination of the house generating an income every month that it's occupied and getting more valuable as time goes on. That's the power in this asset class. And this is the thing that real estate agents can't do. Okay, real estate agents don't speak ROI. We speak ROI, and it's one of the things that will distinguish us in every conversation that we have if we get it in there early in the conversation. And from an investor's perspective, there's nothing else more important than ROI. And so this example right here is going to be kind of a typical example of the ROI of a house in America, $200,000 purchase price. Now, in our example, we're keeping it simple. We've got a $1,500 a month rent. So $18,000 a year. The taxes are $2,000 a year. The insurance is $1,000 a year. The maintenance is 10% of my annual rent. That's the assumption. Okay. 10% of every rent check that I bring in, I'm going to set aside into a maintenance account, because then every month, $150 goes aside, $150 goes aside. Something breaks, I write a check. I don't stress over it. I don't fret over it. And I don't, worst of all, not fix it, right? Surest way to drive a customer out of your restaurant is to have dirty forks and spoons. The surest way to drive a tenant out of your rental is to not fix the crap that breaks. So I'm going to set aside $1,800 every year for maintenance and repairs. And then property management, I've got it at $100 a month. We have different prices in different markets, but these are my nice round numbers, and there's no HOA. So the total operating expenses, the cost for me to run this business. And so think of it that way. My house is a business. My tenant is a customer. They pay $1,500 a month. I pay a bunch of expenses. So like back to the restaurant analogy, I've got customers coming in, they're buying the food. My expenses are, I pay the rent on the building. I pay my staff. I pay for the food itself, right? The steaks, the raw steaks and the salt and pepper and everything else and the green beans. So I have all these operating expenses to run my business. And when I'm done paying all my operating expenses, I've got my net operating income. So my total of all my expenses is $6,000. All right. So if I subtract that $6,000 out of my gross rent, I am left with $12,000 of net operating income. Write a check for $200,000 and I get a $12,000 income after all expenses. I've made a 6% return on my money. I'm leaving some things out for simplicity, because the first thing you need to do is you need to get your brain around the formula so you understand what it is that we're calculating and in the real world what it means, and then we can sharpen our pencil. So for example, I don't have a vacancy rate in here. Okay. House is going to be vacant. Even if Reservoir House does a bang up job, I'm going to lose a month every 2 years, which would be about a 5% vacancy rate. But I'm not including that because I want to get the basics in place. What did I pay for it? Like, I don't have my closing costs in here. Okay, so we're going to sharpen this as we go. But the point we're in right now is to really understand the fundamentals. But one of the big things that I was leaving out is what happens when you have a mortgage. Okay, and what does cash on cash return mean? And so I'm going to go into another layer here. The top section of this is the same thing we just did, except you're going to see now that I've got a 35% down payment in my model now and a $130,000 mortgage amount in the model. So I've inserted this reality, which is I actually only put down 35 to buy the house, and I've got a mortgage of 130, which means my rent is the same, my taxes, everything is the same. My operating expenses are the same. Operating expenses don't include the mortgage, so it doesn't get calculated into my NOI. It doesn't affect my net yield. But now my mortgage payment, this is an annual number. It's like $713 or something a month. my mortgage payment is going to be $88.56 for the year. So if I subtract that number from the 12,000 of NOI, again, I got 12 grand in cash after expenses. Now I pay the 88.56. What I'm left with is 3,144. So in the case where I actually have a mortgage on this thing, I'm not putting 12 grand in my pocket, I'm putting 3,144 in my pocket. And if I compare that number, not to the amount I paid for the property, but for the amount I put down. Okay, it's always the small number divided by the big number. So for net yields, it's the 12,000 divided by the 200,000. For the cash on cash return, it's the cash flow after debt, after mortgage, divided by the down payment. And I've got a 4.49 return instead of a 6% return. The next component of ROI is cash on cash plus HPA. And the net yield and the cash on cash are identical if there's no mortgage. Okay, so that's the proper way to actually explain this. So in this case, I've got a 4.49% cash on cash, and then the HPA, the home price appreciation, again, we use the 20-year average for the county where the property is. Okay, and the reason why that's a very defensible number is simply because it's common sense, it's transparent, it includes a large set of properties, and it may not exactly apply. Who knows what's actually going to happen to the future? But if you want to get a feel for how this investment is likely to perform, well, then that house is likely to perform the way all the houses in this market have over the last 20 years for the next 20 years, unless something's going to change. Okay, and that becomes the next quotient of now when you start thinking about the future, how might you adjust these things?